Hey everyone, welcome to another video. So for today's video, I'm going to be doing a Syndra versus Orianna lane review. And so this is one of those matchups where you have two champions that have very similar range. So there's very specific certain fundamentals that you need to apply and think about when you're playing a matchup like this. So we'll dive right in. And what we're going to do is start with the runes and rune setup. And rune setup drastically changes how this lane also plays out. So I'm actually the Syndra this game, and I choose to go Comet. And the reason I like playing Comet is because I feel like this lane is very poke oriented, and I feel like when I take Electrocute, it's very difficult for me to reliably proc it. And since I can, we're both very high range champions, I find myself just poking with Q a lot, and Comet just feels like over duration of the lane, I just get a lot more damage off. And so the Orianna in this game actually ends up taking Airy. And that's very important to note, which means that she's going to be more focused on the laning phase rather than taking Summon a Spellbook or Unsealed Spellbook, sorry, and scaling up. So I need to make sure that I have to keep that into account, that she's going to have a little bit more damage than usual. And so the other thing we need to cover before we dive right in is the items. And because I went Inspiration Secondary, and because I think this is a very heavy trading matchup, I really like going Corrupting Pot on both sides. But this Orianna's actually decided to go Dorans and two pots. And the reason this is good for me as Syndra is that if I focus on her poking and making sure I poke her early game, she's not going to be able to come back with a Corrupting Pot or anything and refill charges. She's going to have to either buy new pots or have to buy a refillable potion herself, which is going to be really gold inefficient. So that's definitely something I want to note. And then for Summoners, I end up taking Ignite and she takes Teleport. So, diving right in here. The first objective of Syndra in this lane is because number one thing you need to understand is that Syndra, just because she has equal range, she also spikes way earlier than Orianna. So how this lane should be played out at the highest level is Syndra should look to pressure Orianna early by slow building a wave and poking Orianna under tower. But the objective for Orianna is to be able to thin the wave as much as you can, keep it in a position where she can't get poked under tower and not get ganked, and manage the wave by constantly thinning it and farming with Q. So what you should see early game in this specific lane is Syndra looking to constantly poke, use the fact that she has Corrupting Pot and Time Orb Tonic and Biscuits, because this is something that you can definitely utilize in pretty much all matchups when it's like this specific rune setup. And so notice here, notice how as Syndra, when you're versing Orianna, you generally want to position on the opposite side of the lane of where the ball is. So if the ball's on this side here, you should be making an effort to lean onto the other side. So this makes it a lot harder for Orianna to hit her ball. So again, if we just tying it back to the first objective here, Syndra should be looking to create a minion advantage. And one thing, another tip here for for Syndra in this matchup is you don't want to be standing in the middle of the minions, because remember, you want to be building a minion wave into Orianna so you can poke her under tower or use your minion advantage to create favorable trades. But if you stand in the middle of the minion wave, Orianna can both CS and thin the wave while hitting you. So by standing outside the minion wave, it makes her make a choice, which is really important, especially in this matchup. So as Syndra, again, you're going to have a minion advantage early, which means you're going to hit level 2 first, which means you should always look to walk up and pressure level 2. Here, I could have gone for an E, but I chose not to. Unsure why I did, but a lot of the time here you should be looking to do a QE or a QW trade, but I think QE is a lot better once you hit level 2. And so notice here, once you kind of get level 2 first, you're starting to build up this minion advantage as Syndra. This is all tying into your first objective, which is looking to early pressure and build a wave. And here, Orianna's trying to thin, but one thing that Orianna's already failed to do is that she's taken too much damage level 1. So if I'm Orianna in this position, I don't want to have used a pot right now. I want to be very, very healthy. Orianna shouldn't have tried to fight level 1, should have tried to back up, farm creeps, thin it out, and now Syndra has too much control over the wave. She's able to kind of play quite aggressive. So again, Syndra's hitting level 3 this time. Ends up missing the abilities, but again, it's getting a huge chunk off. And this is another problem with Orianna. She's not respecting the fact that Syndra has a wave advantage. And this is what you can do in all elos when you're playing this matchup. If you're playing the Syndra side, most Oriannas don't understand that you power spike way later. So you need to give your level 1 and 2 over to Syndra, farm from a distance, and not take too much damage. You want to be as healthy as possible. If you're Orianna, you want to be as healthy as possible catching this wave onto tower. So if you're Syndra, again in this position, you want to be use this opportunity once you've built this wave to get a bit of vision. And the reason this is important is this is going to give you a side to lean so you can start to barrage Orianna under tower with a bunch of poke. And okay, one next thing that you need to understand in these matchups is that the jungle matchup is really like drastically alters this lane matchup. Since they're both two ranged mages who have very little mobility, they're extremely vulnerable. So let's just say, if Syndra has the pressure jungler early game, this will allow Syndra to play super aggressively and actually make the lane much harder for Orianna to play out. Whereas if Orianna actually has the early pressure jungler, let's say she has a Lee Sin or something, and I had a Kindred, then it's actually going to make it a lot harder for me as Syndra to be able to punish this Orianna. So that's definitely something to keep in mind here. And in this game, I'm versing a Graves, who is not really going to look for level 3 ganks, and his ganks are actually quite poor. So this is actually playing to my playing in my hand as a Syndra, so I can just play up quite aggressively here. So far, I've gotten a really nice bit of poke. I've forced Orianna to use both pots. I've only used one corrupting pot. So I'm in a really good position here. So now, in this position, I say this all the time in all ELOs, is that the Syndra, this is where they start to begin to throw their lead. So as a Syndra right now, what you want to be doing is a few things that you can a few things you need to make your mind up. This is very important. So as this wave crashed and now it's going to slow bounce out towards you, what you need to think about is, okay, what's the state of the map right now? So in terms of what are my junglers doing, what are the actual jungle champions, etc. So your options are, firstly, let it push out a little bit and keep it in the middle. And the reason, and actually have a slight minion advantage, which will allow you to get to the scuttle first if you think a scuttle fight's going to happen. 2, you actually start to let it freeze towards you because you may have a jungle champ that can actually gank. Your jungler might be able to gank, and it's like gank oriented, like Jarvan, Lee Sin, or something like that. So in which Orianna would be extremely vulnerable and would either have to blow flash or give up a lot of farm or like get zoned from CS or just have to TP, base and TP. Or the next thing is what you can do is let the wave come out a little bit and start the next round of slow building. And then the reason is that is really strong is because A, it's going to allow you to poke them again under tower, but it's again, you can use that opportunity to then reset with that slow built wave. So in this specific situation, I don't think Olaf is a big ganking oriented jungler, but what I wanted to do is leave it out here a little bit because I wanted to. So once the wave's in this position, because you're stronger and Orianna has no pots, I can actually sit on the other side of the wave and start to create a slow push slowly. And then again, because I'm Syndra, I need to be at these fights always first because I never want to let Orianna get to any of these fights first because in the early game, this is my domain. I need to abuse my early strength. And right here, I'm starting to form my slow build. And then I actually thought Orianna was basing, so I go to check, but she's actually stayed here. And so this is what the next mistake is. People panic when they see their enemy laner staying. They always just push. I need a reset. No, I still got a corrupting pot. I still got a biscuit. He has no biscuits or no pots. So I can just again slow build. And what's the strength of slow building? Is that if I slow build this wave in, it's going to give me a lot of room to poke him under tower. It's going to give me a lot of room to either base if I want to, or it's going to make it a lot harder for me to get ganked because there's such a big wave that the jungler has to go through. And here, if you're Orianna, what your main goal here is, your main goal here is that you don't want to take barely any damage because it's going to be really difficult for you to go for the CS and go for a trade. And since you have no pots as Orianna right now, you really he probably just needs to reset, come back, get a Dark Seal and a refillable and accept reality and catch the wave as it crashes. But if she walks up here and takes damage from me as this wave is pushing in, it's going to make her really vulnerable to getting dived. And so notice here, I'm standing on the other side of the wave, trying to deny her as much CS as possible. Plus, if she walks up, I'm going to look to trade on her. And she tries to CS from a distance, and I'm able to get a really good trade off. And so now, not only is my wave really big, I was able to get that favorable trade because she didn't play patiently, and now I'm continually not letting her base, constantly pushing her all the way back, and now making her make a choice. Do you want to miss a bunch of this CS, or do you want to stay and you want to get dived by me? And this is again the strength of just slow building in these sort of matchups. And this is all tying into that first objective as Syndra, which is you really want to push your early lead. And as soon as I see Graves bot here, I use this as a go sign for me to look to dive Orianna. And because she greeted, I was able to get a free kill here. And now my objective is pretty much completed. I've got a very, very good early lead on this Orianna. I've come back with a lost chapter, and now it's going to start to get quite out of control. And the way this matchup is, because they're both equal range, it's very much about stat checking. And dodging skill shots doesn't even matter at this point because I just stat check so hard. And this is why when you're playing Orianna, you need to play extremely patient and not get too fast. That yes, you're going to lose the early game, but you can't give Syndra early kills or these massive leads. You need to play very slow and patiently. Whereas Syndra, you need to use your wave manipulation and correct leaning and using your abilities with the wave. So, for example, abusing the fact that when you have your minion advantage, use that to get favorable trades while leaning to a side where your vision is to create an early lead and play solid bases, play poke, and create that early advantage. Because what's going to happen now is that when you have these item advantages after your first base as Syndra, this is where you can just start to dominate. You can start to do insane amount of poke. You can start to do the same thing where you want to just continually ward, push, poke, and back up your jungle constantly. You're going to have a constant amount of pressure here. So this way, I'll kind of stop here because the lane's kind of over at this point, and it's going to just continue to be a stomp from now on. If the lane were to be even at this point, then that would be really bad for Syndra because that would mean that Orianna's successfully outmaneuvered you in the early game. This first like 1 to 6 is super important. But again, what you need to be as Syndra, I want you when you play this matchup, guys. I really want you to be focused on making sure that your wave manipulation is purposeful. Every single wave, you should be knowing or have an idea about what you want to do. Because if you autopilot in this matchup, you will get outscaled and you will lose the game. So hopefully this helps. There's a few concepts here that you need to kind of tie into your own gameplay. So take your time. Cheers. Thanks for watching.